Today I'm going to show you how to replace the ball joints on a Jeep Wrangler. Welcome to Word Wrenching. So this video was supposed to be just a basic how-to on replacing ball joints, but if you're on a Jeep or you know someone that owns a Jeep, you know that these things never go how it's supposed to. First thing we need to do is jack up the front. Make sure you use jack stands to support the front end and then slowly lower the vehicle onto the jack stands. We're going to remove this tire. You can use standard hand tools, everything. I like to use my Milwaukee impacts, but you don't need to have a Milwaukee impact to do this. Now all the tools that I use in this video are going to be in the description below. Go ahead and remove your tire. We're going to set it under the body so that way if the car were to fall by some chance, this will at least protect us somewhat. So now we're going to want to go in and we want to get this rotor off. Let's remove this caliper. It's a size 13 millimeter. There's 2 bolts behind it. So we're just going to take our trusty impact and we're going to remove these 2 bolts here. If your caliper is rusted on, just grab yourself your trusty flathead screwdriver. All right. Now just set that there for a second. We're going to grab a bungee cord or a long zip tie and we're going to hook it up here so that way that caliper isn't just hanging, because it's got this rubber line and if it hangs, it could damage the fitting, it could break the line. We don't want to have to deal with that today. So just use a bungee cord. We're going to use a zip tie and we're just going to keep it out of the way where it's suspended and we're not putting tension on this hose right here. So I'm just going to hook it to here because that'll be the easiest to pull out. Let's find our place where we're going to hook it. Oh, perfect. We're actually just going to create a loop. We'll take this shock tower, or whatever it's called. I think it's a tower. Yeah. Boom. It's hanging. It's out of the way. Should be fine for us. Next, we're going to have to get this rotor off. If your rotor is frozen on like this, and we live in Florida and there's salt air, but I know you Rust Belt people are going to say you don't know what rust is, and I agree with you because you guys deal with some extremely rusted out cars. But in our case, let's just hit it with a hammer and see if we can't get it to come free. There it is. And set that to the side. So now we need to pull out this unibearing. Because this is a 4-wheel drive car, we have an actual drive axle up here. So we need to remove this unibearing, wheel bearing, whatever you want to call it. But there's 3 bolts back here that we're going to need to shoot with some penetrating spray. I use PB Blaster. It's just what I got in the shop. Let that soak for a minute and then we'll hit it with the impact. If you have issues where you can't get it out, hit it with blowtorch. Now you're going to want to go in and undo these bolts. Turn your wheel so that way you get a better access to it. And then these are actually 12-point bolts. So we're going to use 12-point socket. Okay. Set your bolts to the side so you don't lose them. Now we're going to remove the axle. Sometimes this is stuck and you're going to have to use a screwdriver, pry bar, chisel, and a hammer, kind of break it free, just do it evenly. But we live in Florida. We don't have that issue. Slowly pull your axle out, don't drop it. Now that we have the axle out, this is a great time to go and check just the axle, check this seal here, and check your U-joints. We want to look and see if there's any kind of damage. Like, we want to see, are they worn out? These honestly look fine. They're covered. They look oily. That's just because of all the PB Blaster I sprayed. So I would say these are fine. There's no reason to replace them. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove these cotter pins and castle nuts. This is the upper. We got to do the lower as well. And then just turn the wheel so that way you get plenty of access. Now we need to remove the lower cotter pin. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the castle nut. We're going to leave it like that and I'll show you why later. We now have castle nuts removed. First castle nut's still there. I'll show you why. Now we need to free the knuckle from where the ball joints are. So you're just going to have to keep working it until it breaks free. And it could be a while, but main considerations, don't hit it here, don't hit it here, don't hit it here. You want to hit this general area and up here on that lip. But if you hit it here and you hit it here and here, it's going to break, so don't do that. So just set your knuckle to the side, put your castle nut in your box of stuff, and let's check these ball joints and see what kind of shape they're in. Yeah, I'm sure that's okay. We're going to go ahead, we're going to pop these out. Now we can use our ball joint press to remove and install new ones. So we're going to need our press, and then we're going to need a different cup for the ball joints that we're pulling out. So now we want to remove our upper ball joint. We're going to use this collar, which goes slightly around that edge. We'll put this cap on. Then we have our other cap. We'll slide that, and that'll press up against there. That was way harder than it should have been. It's probably because I don't have the proper ball joint press. I have a cheap Amazon one. As you can see, it still worked. Now we're going to press in the lowered ball joint. Now that the lower ball joint is in, you stop when you feel resistance. We're just going to add our grease fitting. And you just snug it down. Let's go ahead and let's add that upper ball joint, and then we can put this thing back together. Make sure it's going in straight. It's not going to go in properly if it's not going in straight. We have adapter at the bottom, spacer, we have a cap, another adapter, and then we have a breaker bar at the top. And just tighten it in until it's bottomed out. Now that it's tightened down, just loosen up, take it all apart. All right, now we're going to replace the knuckle. Okay, the hole. Now we're just going to line it back up for the cotter pin hole. Now the holes are lined up, insert a fresh cotter pin. Now we're going to do the upper one. We're going to do 75 foot-pounds. Now we're going to grease the fittings. Okay, you want to go until you just start to see it come out. Now we can reinsert the axle. Little tip, use that screwdriver to pry that up to get it in easier. Let's line up the bolts. Now we're going to get some Loctite, install these 3 bolts. Don't forget to put your dust shield back on when you put the axle in. I didn't forget. I was just doing that for demonstration purposes, you know. Now we're going to put the bolts in with the thread locker. Add some blue Loctite to the threads. You don't need a ton, just a good amount. We'll just get them started for now. Now we're going to need to snug them down, and then we'll torque them to 75 foot-pounds. So I decided to start working on the other side of the Jeep and kind of knock that one out, but this is where things went really downhill that day. The lower ball joint was seized on there. It wouldn't come off no matter what. I broke one breaker bar, so then I tried to use a blowtorch, which you're not supposed to do because it heats up the grease inside and it could cause it to explode. Broke another breaker bar, and then 2 different impacts wouldn't work on it. That thing was just not coming off. We couldn't get it to move no matter what we did. Eventually, I just had to give up on it, and one thing I didn't realize is that it was way hotter outside than I was aware of, and I was extremely dehydrated, just started to overheat. So when you guys are working on your cars, especially now that we got summer coming up, make sure you're staying hydrated, and because the heat's nothing to play with. So eventually we just got to the point, like at 9 hours in, that gave up on this ball joint, slapped everything back together, pushed it into a parking lot, and then the next day I jumped back in and finished the rest of the job. But if your body's telling you that it's time to stop, make sure you stop. All right, so it's a new day. We're back together. And then all you need to do from that point, once you get your ball joints back on and you got the axle in, I got the torque settings in the description. Mount your caliper. That's all ready. All you have left to do is put your wheel back on. And then make sure you torque them in a star pattern. And it's torqued. That's how you replace ball joints on an 06 Wrangler. Only thing left to do is to put the car back on the ground.